everybody. Welcome back to the Partnership Playbook. Here we are with Mark Harmon on chapter 2. For those who were able to see our last episode, we talked about some interesting topics. We had a very good conversation around the basics. We talked about the importance of performance management. We talked about sustaining those results. And we did talk about making an impact in all the components that actually get you there. So today, we continue pulling back the curtains on what additional items matter to building a successful relationship. So, Mark, here we are on chapter 2. Are you ready to pull back some more curtains or peel back some more layers?
Absolutely. And again, thank you for having me on this episode. I'm super excited to dive deeper into this topic, particularly as we start talking about successful partnerships. I know we talked about that in our first episode a little bit, but I'm really looking forward to diving deeper into this topic simply because I believe so strongly that healthy relationships are the key to sustainable results. So let's flip the script a little bit, if you will. And I'm going to ask
Sure.
you the first question
Hmm.
today, just to change things up. Guillermo, from your perspective, from the BPO side, how do you guys view what makes a relationship successful or not?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Mark, because it has evolved. And I look in my past life, no need to mention names or company names or anything, but how it was back then and how it is now. Our approach at World Connection is we want to make outsourcing easy for our partners. So, to that end, we need to understand, and I think I mentioned a little bit of that on our previous episode, to understand, well, what keeps you up at night? What is it that is taking your focus away from your business? And to understand those pain points and to truly say, how can we apply our BPO expertise at solving for them? And there is where, for example, understanding all this information becomes critical for us to be able to design solutions, not just sit people and connect people and start answering calls, but why are we answering those calls? What problem are you hoping to solve? And communication takes a very important role here because this is where those interactions begin to strengthen how strong of a relationship we will be building in terms of how much of your needs can we start anticipating just by our own expertise, evaluating your business with an objective eye that tells us here's here are here are areas that must be evaluated and must be at the heart of the current problems that our new partner is experiencing. And that goes from deep, exhausting sessions of RCAs to the daily touch bases, the weekly business reviews, the monthly business reviews, the QBR. What are we coming to the table with? Are we coming together to regurgitate the metrics that we see on a daily basis? Or are we having those right conversations of where are we going? And how long does it take us to get there? What obstacles are there along the way? And I'm not even going to get into a more complex topic, like for example, lately, what technology is out there that can help us get there? That's hit or miss, and I know that's a controversial topic that I'm not going to start, but it is part of the conversation. So that's what that landscape looks from our side.
Yeah, I think you hit on a couple of really important things that the relationship starts with a comprehensive understanding of the business. What is the objective? What is the purpose? What is the mission? And I know we talked about that a little bit in episode one. But the second thing that you mentioned that stood out to me, I think is so critical, It's the communication and not just communicating things like you said, regurgitating data points. But we're talking about being the eyes, ears, the window into the operation for the client. Because in some cases, in many cases, the BPOs are things are fully outsourced. So the entire customer care part of the business has been transitioned to a third party. And there's a lot of trust that goes in that. There's a lot of risk that goes in that, and they become the sole face of that part of the organization when it comes to the customer. And so, if the communication there is not exceptionally strong and effective, then it erodes the trust between the client and the partner. And this is the thing we've talked a lot about I've talked a lot about with providers I've worked with in the past. Be the insight to the business. Be the engine that can extract all of that really important information and feed it back to the client so the client knows what's going on, knows what you're doing, how you're doing it, and whether or not it's effective. So it fits in the model, but it still requires the ability to take all of that business activity, whether it's a customer engagement or whether it's a coaching or what QA has found from a behavioral opportunity standpoint, whatever it is, and turning that into a effective communication plan that clearly articulates exactly what's going on. And more than that, what are you guys doing to improve? And when this part works really well, the other part works even better. The system works better because you're able to articulate exactly what needs to change. This is the heartbeat of the relationship. And it's not that surprising, I don't think, because think about your relationships in your personal life. If you're married or have a significant other, or even just your friends and family, you're not going to have a healthy relationship if you're not very good at communicating what's going
Yep.
on, what's happening, what needs to change, what you're working on, like whatever that is. It's you got to bring the communication to the table if you want this to be not only a short-term success, but really a long-term, a healthy relationship throughout the life cycle of that particular arrangement.
Absolutely. So communication is essential, and something that I would like to backtrack into my previous statement was how important it becomes that at the selection process, or as you're building, let's not call it the selection process, but as you're building up that relationship and you're deciding, will we be able to work together? Are we a good cultural fit? Because that's where that trust is built, where I need to be able to come up to you to be able to say things that you didn't want to hear. But I need to say them because now I have become your eyes and ears. I am the direct source of information from your front lines. And it is on me to go ahead and bring up their concerns, their dissatisfactions, the things they like, the things they wish they had. But I have to have that element of trust to be able to do that so that it is not a conflict conversation. So, speaking of that, I know that we talk about the communication being essential in so, how important of an ingredient it is to the relationship. Let me flip it now and ask you a question. So, how do you decide if an organization will be a true partner versus just a service provider, somebody that, well, I need you to take this type of call. Yes, we can because we have the agents and we have the expertise. And yes, sure, we can do business together. How do you differentiate the two?
Yeah, it really starts long before you ever sign the contract. And that's true about the relationship. Before you ever make a selection, the game really starts when you first start meeting different providers because there's a lot of BPOs out there. Everybody who's been in this industry knows that. And they all tend to have a very similar approach, and which is what you said. What's the call type? We can do it. We can do sales. We can do tech support. We can do customer service. We can do back office. We have all of these capabilities. And then now, of course, what we mentioned earlier, here's all of our technology and AI capabilities, can do all these magical, wonderful things for your business. But it gets very sort of white noise because they all sound very, very similar. So what's the difference? And while I don't want to dive too deep into how we select or how you get into that, we can talk about that in a future episode. What I want to talk about is what I call the long game. And there's different approaches. There's not one size fits all or necessarily one right approach. But what I found to be the most effective is it really starts by evaluating vendors in a very different way, or prospective partners in a different way. And it starts with those first conversations, not just what can you do, but who are you as an organization? Who are the people that we're going to be working with? How are the salespeople? Do the salespeople represent the culture of that organization? Let's talk to some leadership. Let's do all of the stuff before we ever even, maybe even have any business to give. We're starting a relationship in a with a long-term mindset. And what happens when you think about this from the long game perspective is you start to weed out the people that just want your money. You start to weed out the people that just want your business. They're just trying to hit their quotas. And I'm not saying quotas are bad and the money, look, it's a business. I get that. And I'm fine with that. But you weed out the people that aren't really interested in the long game, in long-term success of your business. And to me, that's a huge differentiator between partner and provider. Because lots of people can sell you lots of things, but is it the thing that I need? Is it the thing that I want? Is this a thing I'm going to enjoy over time? I can buy $1 million car. Am I ever going to take it out of the driveway? I don't know. Hopefully. But before I ever get there, I need to understand, is that even the right fit for me? Is it the right vehicle? Does it have the right amenities? Is it going to fit my family? Right? Like all of these things are questions. That's where it starts. And so we take that approach because we really want to understand who organizations are, and because we've learned that if they're not a good cultural fit, they will not be a successful long-term partner. We have found that to be true. Now, just because they're a good cultural fit doesn't necessarily guarantee it, but it is a requirement to at least have that common foundation, that starting point that says, yeah, we see the business in a similar way. We believe in the similar things about where we can take the business and how we're going to do it. And we're really committed to working together to make this thing work.
I think that what it does do also is get you on a short list of like-minded individuals. I mean, Mark, I get, pitched all the time in solutions. And sometimes I face the same thing. And it's hard to have conversations with individuals that are very pleasant and everything, but then you say, well, but you don't know me. How do you know that this solution that you're trying to get me to sign on, that you tell me that it is, the latest thing that will solve all my problems, even works with me? I mean, you haven't even asked me enough questions to know what I do. And ultimately, I think what we aspire to do, and here speaking as a CEO for World Connection, is I want to return that peace of mind back to our partners so that they can say, that complicated thing that I used to do, now I have entrusted a partner so that they can do it, so that I can regain and refocus and redirect that focus to grow in my business. And I think we're evaluating something important, because when we look at the perspective of an organization and we see, well, who they are, what are the big client names that they've served, what technology experience they've acquired over the years, what infrastructure they have, that matters. I'm not going to say that it doesn't matter, but there's a flip side to that. There's another side of the coin, because will they align with my style of communication? Will we have a cultural fit where, for example, casual conversations over, look, we're having this, we're seeing this thing. Can we go ahead and pivot and make a right turn today? Will I be able to have those conversations or no? Will it be something more cumbersome that is going to be more bureaucratic, etc.? So those are things that I think for the good of both organizations must be identified up front.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You hit on a couple of really key things there. I'll start with the last one because it's so important from I believe from both sides of the fence. The clients, of course, want the right provider that's going to be a good cultural fit and last the long term, but the BPOs need that as well because the level of effort to sustain a relationship that's not healthy, that's not forward thinking, that's not progressing is insane, and it only gets harder with less return on all of that sort of energy investment, that mental and emotional investment. So when we talked about throughout this, the relationship matters because you got to be able to have those conversations that are hard, but you're not going to have that if you haven't started off with the right fit and the right alignment. Think about it on a dating app or you can swipe left, swipe right, whatever, speed date. Those are all ways to potentially find a match. But we all know that the real match is not going to come from a TV show. It's going to come from meaningful conversations. It's going to come from asking the right questions. It's going to come from evaluating capabilities. Not to say that one is better than the other. It's really more just about that fit. And so I wrote a blog a while ago about this, and I got some interesting reactions from it. A lot of people read it. I got a lot of positive reactions from it as well. But the name of the blog is it's on LinkedIn if you want to check it out. But it's called "Stop It," and it's really about getting salespeople to stop trying to generate business with really ineffective tools. It's to your point, we get inundated with solicitations from people that I don't know from anyone. I don't know them, they don't know me, and they're putting invites on my calendar to talk to them. Why would I
Sure.
do that? That's insane. If somebody did that to you in your real life, you would call the police. You would think they were stalking you. Right? Somebody shows up at your door and wants to come in and have dinner with you. You're like, get out of here, right? I'm calling the cops. But yet here's this whole side of the business that's so desperate for something that they're using these very, or at least that's what it appears. So they use these very desperate tactics. And what I'm saying
I
is
agree.
it's long-term business requires the right engagement, the right relationship way up front. And to your point, yeah, eventually you take this massive pool, you whittle it down to a couple of really good contenders. So then you go through a much more comprehensive evaluation process so you can really make sure that that they're the right fit. They may not, you can't predict the future. This is not about guaranteeing results. It's about positioning ourselves so that we are able to produce the right results. And that really starts with this sort of relationship thing. And I know we talked about some of the things we probably teased them for the future, but I will tell you, in my book as well, I talk about this a little bit because I share the story of my wife and I and how we met and our first years of marriage and some of the challenges that we faced. Because just like operational rigor, there's a rigor to this part as well. There's a commitment and a mindset and a discipline that's required to make relationships work, to build the right one, to evaluate to make sure they're a good fit, but then to consistently invest in that relationship. That's the key. That's the secret sauce, I would say, of the relationship part. That it's not a one and done thing. It doesn't just magically stay together. You got to keep working at it. You got to keep trusting. You got to keep engaging. You got to keep communicating, and that's the big differentiator, I think, from something that is short term, sort of flash in the pan, to something that can sustain for decades.
Absolutely. It's certainly not a spur of the moment decision that you make because it's a long commitment. it's the long game, as you stated. Well, friends, a lot of that wisdom can be found on the
Yeah, so the book
Rockstar
is
Method.
Making a Lasting Impact, the Rockstar Performance Method. I encourage you guys to check it out if you would. And if you really enjoy it, leave me a review. If you hate it, maybe just send me an email. I don't know. You don't have to tell the world that you hated it. But I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about this stuff. I'm obviously passionate about it. I really care about it because I believe it's the difference of how we can really take the industry to the next level by building these really good relationships, having really trusted partners who are all working collaboratively together to elevate the game. And when it happens, man, I'm telling you, it's so fulfilling. It feels good. The results are visible and tangible. And look, we haven't done business together for some years, and here we are, still friends after all these years. Not because we
True.
worked because we invested in a relationship all those years ago. And I think we're just sort of living proof that this is how it works. And this is where it
Yeah.
really means the most.
Those relationships over time. Now, I know that originally we discussed that maybe this was going to have two chapters, but the conversation has been so fruitful that I think this must take us to a third chapter that I think that addresses something that is on a lot of people's minds. Because when I represent the company at a lot of events, I can see the receptiveness of what you're saying when you're talking to people passionately. I'm also a passionate person about what I do. I love it, so I can talk for hours about it and provide all the details. But what if you haven't outsourced before? Where do you go then? How do you begin from zero? And that is where we will talk. That is the topic that we will address on chapter 3 with our accomplished author, Mark Harmon. Um, Thank you to all of our viewers for having stuck around for this second chapter of this great discussion. Again, please do write any type of comments that you have, any questions, any doubts, any feedback that you may have on the comments, and stay tuned for chapter 3 when we will talk about with more detail on recommendations. How do you select a partner if you don't have any previous reference of having done that before? Thank you again, Mark, for being here, and I look forward to our next chapter.
My pleasure. Thank you.